I will not sacrifice my civilization or my culture. We've made too many compromises already, too many retreats. They invade our territory and we fall back. They destroy entire nations and we fall back. Not again. The line must be drawn here. This far, no further. And I will make them pay for what they've done.
The world is falling apart. Far-left global communists have spent the last 50 years slowly eroding the West's faith in itself. They infest the media and academia. They are the political elite. A once proud civilization brought enlightenment to a brutal and savage world, but has been browbeaten into shame and derision of its own achievements by those entrusted to protect it. Cultural Marxism, cultural relativism, and degenerate leftist thought, if you could even call it thought, runs almost unchallenged throughout the mainstream. Even so-called conservatives buy into the biggest lies in what can only be described as sheer cowardice. They are afraid of the outrage mob despite being gifted a clear recipe on how to defeat it through the example of the God Emperor. What we need is an antidote. When you are dehydrated, you need water. When you are hungry, you need food. When your life is devoid of meaning, you need a true purpose worthy of that which created you. The antidote to globalism is nationalism, and it starts with the ultimate minority, the individual. It starts with you. Inalienable individual rights exist and must not be infringed upon by the state or any other entity. It may seem counterintuitive for a nationalist to hold this position, especially to those who oppose it. Nonetheless, it's important to set an intellectual base. In the 20th century, nationalism was bastardized by collectivists who used it to push their own satanic agenda. They preyed upon our natural instinct for group evolutionary strategy and used it to further their own interests and lust for power. Worse, they gave the enemy ammunition with which to smear what is good and moral with the taint of collectivism. National socialism is not true nationalism, as it enslaves the people it claims to represent. National socialism is another form of satanic left-wing sophistry and must be rejected if we are to forge ultimate victory. The founding fathers of the United States realized that God handed each individual inalienable rights upon birth. These rights include, but are not limited to, the right to speak your mind without censorship, the right to self-defense, especially from the violence of the state, the right to privacy, and the right to freely associate with whomever we wish. No individual or group has the right to infringe upon the rights of others. This is natural and universal moral law. Abuse of this law is the root cause of all societal destruction through tyrannical order or nihilistic chaos. The state is violence, and the initiation of violence is always immoral. A state does not have the right to initiate violence against its own people or others. This is an obvious extension of point 1. We need to highlight and understand who and what the true enemy of liberty and the people really is. The left, globalists, and them, if you know what I mean, are not the true enemy. They are simply expressions of that which is actually standing against us. They are disciples of the ultimate evil. They are not the evil itself. No one group has the right to violate moral laws, whether it calls itself the government, the enlightened priestly class, or claims it's acting for your own good. The role of government is to protect life, liberty, and property. When the state steals your money and calls it taxation, when it removes your right to speak freely and calls it love, and when it opens the borders to third world migrants and calls it compassion, it not only fails in its duty, it outright violates your God-given rights. True authority can only be given freely. It cannot be stolen by violence. Authority stolen by violence invites upon itself further violence. The non-aggression principle is natural law and applies to all individuals, groups, and peoples. Race is an extended family and the natural nation. All racial and ethnic groups have the right to territory and to live peacefully by their own values and cultural norms. Rights emanate from the individual, but humans are social creatures. The need and drive to be part of a group is deep and ingrained. It is also a necessary strategy for genetic survival and expansion. While foreign individuals can, and often are, assimilated into a wider racial and ethnic group, this becomes impossible with mass migration and invasion of foreigners into a previously homogeneous territory. When ethnic groups enter a territory en masse, their own evolutionary group strategy trumps that of the host culture. This is a fact of nature we have forgotten because those in power have hidden it from us. The path to meaning is acting in your own interest, the interest of your family and your community now and into the future. What is ethnicity if not your extended family? Humans naturally prefer to associate with people who are more like themselves, and all races and ethnicities have the right to in-group preference. Nationalism is about love of your kin, not hatred of others. So-called nationalists of the 20th century ultimately enslaved their own people, as I mentioned. They may have professed a love for their own, but their apparent love included the worst kind of abuse. When rulers are willing to abuse their own, what do you expect they would do to others? True nationalism is about love of your own people and acting in the interests of the individuals who encompass that group. A nationalist does not hate those who are not his people because God does not hate them. All individuals have inalienable rights. Those include the right to be free from abuse of other groups. Central banking and debt-based currencies must end. Central banking violates the non-aggression principle egregiously. It is nothing more than state violence imposed financially. It gives those closest to the new supply of money an inordinate advantage over those furthest away, while stealing their wealth via inflation. The state enforces the power of the central bank, while the people suffer its abuses. Debt may be a necessary tool for economic expansion through investment and capital allocation. However, when it forms the central pillar of your economic system, it is doomed to collapse itself. No fiat currency has ever lasted because the incentive for those in charge to use it for their own ends is too great. Counterfeit by government is still counterfeit. Precious metals like gold and silver are more than adequate for currency, and we now have an even better replacement: cryptocurrencies. Central banking is a globalist tool, and it needs to end. A true capitalist system can only exist in an environment of high trust. Those who breach trust shall be removed from it. Capitalism, at its core, is trade absent force, property rights, and contractual agreements between two or more parties. When individuals violate agreements, they erode the most important factor in economic activity: trust. Societies that lack trust are societies doomed to stagnate and fail. Those who commit fraud or breach agreements need to have their ability to create such agreements removed, at least for a time. This is not a violation of the non-aggression principle, as it is the protection of property from deceptive and fraudulent actions. The need to keep trust within a society is paramount. I need to highlight, mass migration and invasion of foreign groups through the doctrine of multiculturalism is the antithesis of creating trust. It actively erodes trust as it divides us and creates too many competing interests for the smooth running of society. We can see this clearly through increases in crime, but it also happens in far more subtle ways. Multiculturalism is the enemy of nationalism and must be countered and reversed. The term multiculturalism literally means multiple cultures, and culture is just another way of saying ethnicity or race. In fact, the term culture in this context was created for the sole purpose of replacing the term race in order to hide the link. But that's a whole other kettle of fish. In order for a society to become multicultural, it must first replace a monoculture, meaning it must first replace the dominant ethnicity. Modern multiculturalism, at its heart, is nothing more than the ethnic replacement of whites in our own countries. The greatest fear of the multicultist is a truly nationalist awakening to this reality. This is why they smear, attack, and violently assault people like Lawrence Southern who dare call it out. The endgame of multiculturalism is not a rainbow nation living in harmony and peace. It's race war and genocide. For this reason alone, all people of all races must oppose it. Globalism must end. The nation is the natural political unit of a self-determining people. Globalism is the doctrine of global governance. It is nothing short of global communist rule by a small elite. They pretend they are acting in the interest of world peace, but the truth is they are acting in their own satanic interests. The Tower of Babel is a story of fools who dared to challenge natural law. God taught them a harsh lesson for their hubris. The modern globalist challenges natural law, and their arrogance would see us all suffer. Society evolved as individuals within families within groups of families. The nation is this process taken to its logical end, a large ethnic group acting in the interests of their own extended family. Only the initiation of violence can create political grouping in any other way, and the initiation of violence on peaceful individuals is always immoral. Addendum. This does not mean individuals of other ethnicities cannot or should not marry into different ethnic or national groups. In fact, some genetic variation can often be useful, as it helps avoid certain hereditary diseases associated with an in-group preference that's too restrictive. Problems only arise when one group floods another and thus threatens it with conflict or worse, extinction. As such, any mixing should be on an individual basis only and never imposed by a group elite. The natural way to raise children is with a family of one mother and one father, and the natural way is the best way. If nationalism is at its core about familial ties, it is only logical that a core part of any Nationalist Manifesto must include the basis of the familial unit. It takes one man and one woman to create and raise a child. Nature has given us the natural family. A child needs two parents, and the best two parents are a mother and a father. Children of single mothers are proven far worse off than those raised by a father. Therefore, it is imperative that we venerate the father and the mother. Fathers set values and lead families. Mothers raise and care for them. For children raised by gay couples, the jury is still out, and unfortunately will always be out, while far-left ideologues dominate the discussion. Dual citizenship must end. You are a citizen of your nation, or you are not. Those who currently have dual citizenship need to choose which nation they are a part of, but if they choose citizenship of another nation, that choice must be permanent. It should also come with zero animosity towards individuals who do choose another nation. It is their right as individuals to choose their own path. Respecting the choices of others is a key part of living a moral life. Saying that, for a nation to be strong, it needs a strong in-group preference. The concept of dual citizenship is the antithesis of this. To repeat, you are a citizen of your nation or you are not. There is no in-between. There comes a time in every man's life where he needs to answer the following questions. What do you believe in, and what do you stand for? He who stands for nothing falls for everything, as they say. This manifesto is by no means set in stone for all time. It is simply my application of natural law into the realm of nationhood. If there is one thing we should know by now, it's that violating God's law only ever ends badly. The initiation of violence against peaceful individuals, the commission of fraud, nihilistic hedonism, and attempts at building structures to rival God are all violations of natural law, as is the flooding of foreigners into otherwise homogeneous nations. The only way to describe this is an invasion, yet in our day and age, we have all been put to sleep through state-funded education and media lies. As such, many cannot see the wood for the trees. The slander and threats against those who dare call it out is clear indication of where our elites sit in terms of God and nature. A state with a monopoly on violence that opens its borders to foreigners violates the non-aggression principle. It not only fails in its duty to protect life, liberty and property, it betrays the trust of those under its power. Their sin is treachery, and that, my friends, means they are destined for the ninth and deepest circle of hell.